for the slander. Now why?
Because he did wrong.
Take a guess. He did wrong, but why is he paying the father and not giving it to the girl?
Because she was his property.
Oh,
Right. Well, she's property of the husband, and she's former property of the dad.
Right.
So I'm glad you guys got that right.
She might go back to
Just kidding.
father as a dependent.
What?
Unfairly, she might go back to the father as a dependent of the father, would be another way to look
Yeah,
at it.
yeah. Because unfortunately, for the majority of our world's history, women and children were property. The only one that had any power was the man. So you can kind of see where some of the backlash is coming nowadays, but that's the way it was. But as we continue to read through the Bible, women start having a larger and more powerful role. You see Esther, and then you see
Ruth.
Judges.
Ruth and Naomi.
And you see the Judges. And then once we get to the New Testament, Jesus turns the whole world on its ear, and he starts including women in his group, and he starts teaching women.
Right.
You know, think of Mary. Mary was sitting at his feet, not as a servant, but as a student. So Jesus changes things all around. And as we get further into the New Testament, we have women as leaders. Paul had women in his group, they had women preachers, and we start seeing the Bible portraying women in a different light.
That you can think of is Deborah as a judge about the only female leader in the Old Testament?
Well, no, let's go back to Miriam. Miriam was almost at the same level as Aaron. She wasn't a priest, but she definitely had a leadership role.
Okay.
So even going back that far, women had a role. So, and that's one thing that some feminist theologians miss. They miss the elevated role that women have had throughout the Bible. So, okay, verse 20, here's where it gets really tough. However, if the charge is true and no proof of the woman's virginity can be found, she's brought to the door of her father's house, and the men of the town shall stone her to death.
Yeah.
Stoning, we know, is the approved Jewish way of killing people. Why? I have no idea. Maybe because they had rocks handy. But it was the father's responsibility to make sure that she stayed a virgin as long as she lived in his house.
Would that require 2 witnesses like other things?
Oh, absolutely. At least 2 witnesses. Because you couldn't have just one person making the accusation.
Yeah.
Yeah. Once Deuteronomy gives us that law, that we need at least 2 witnesses, that stays forever. And you need that for every situation, because God does not want anyone to die. Because God is all about life, and when it comes to death, everything has to have proof.
20 to 28.
Okay, if a man is found sleeping with another man's wife, both the man who slept with her and the woman must die. God, and it goes back to what Gary said, God means marriage to be forever, and if 2 married people are sleeping around, it ruins 2 families. And God just can't have that. Then we get to some extra details about if a woman, if a virgin sleeps with a man, you take them both to the gates, stone them both to death. Once again, you get a married man and a virgin pledged to be married, so you're ruining 2 families. God's not going to let that happen.
Observation.
Yeah.
It just seems in Leviticus, most everything should be covered by an animal sacrifice.
Mm-hmm.
And now things have turned into money and stoning.
Yeah, but I think, Gary, if we came to this situation where people were sleeping around, I'd have to look back at it, but I don't think that could be covered by a sacrifice. Well, I'll check it out. Good point, though.
How much, 100 shekels, how much would that be in today's money?
I don't know, but it's,
Here, what money?
Be a whole lot.
it's, 50 shekels is 1¼ pounds, I guess, of gold. So it would be pretty substantial, so that's 2½ pounds. 100 shekels would be 2½ pounds of gold.
Well, it says silver here.
Oh, silver, okay.
I'm checking.
So Christie's gonna get the market price.
I was thinking you'd have to be rich.
Yeah.
So what's
50 shekels of silver in dollars. Oh, wow. $14.51.
Well, that's all?
Well, it's based on silver.
Wow.
So it's converted to US dollars and based on the exchange rate.
So currently, it's not a lot.
Maybe it was real money back then,
Yeah.
but the real money today would be a lot higher.
$14.51.
Yeah.
Compared to 2½
$14.51, so in our currency, not a lot.
Well, I remember in high school, we passed one corn for $1 an hour, so it's a lot of money.
Yeah, that's true, it's all relative.
Yeah, it's not a lot.
Verse 30, a man is not to marry his father's wife, he must not dishonor his father's bed. So this assumes that the father died and he's going to marry his stepmother. So God says, don't do that.
But they did do that. Didn't one of
But he got in trouble for that, too.
Abraham's kid do it?
Yeah, but he got in trouble. One of
Yeah.
Isaac's kids.
That's right.
Yeah.
That was it.
He got in trouble. All right. Doesn't get any better. Deuteronomy 23. Verse 1. No one who has been emasculated by crushing or cutting may enter the assembly of the Lord. Now, the first thing we have to know is the assembly, we're not talking about coming to church or going to temple. The assembly is the community. So it's also about military service and religious service. So we have to think about the people we would want in our military. Okay? That's all the guys in Israel were citizen soldiers. They weren't professional soldiers. So they had other responsibilities. But here, a couple reasons they don't want somebody who was emasculated by crushing or cutting to enter the military. One, falsely, they would think that somebody who was emasculated wouldn't have enough courage to fight. So that's reason number one. Reason number two, the pagans usually did this to their, they made men eunuchs. So then they could serve in the temple and serve their gods and also serve queens. And the third way is if you were captured in war, they would do this to humiliate you. So that's the three reasons why they don't want people in the military. And that's what verse 1 is talking about. We don't want these guys in the military. They can come worship with us, but they can't come and do the military. No one born of a forbidden marriage, nor any descendants of theirs may enter the assembly of the Lord, not even the 10th generation. So when you think about military service, why do you think they would have this law in there? Nobody born of a forbidden marriage. Couldn't trust them because a forbidden marriage was an Israelite marrying a pagan woman. So if you marry a pagan woman, they're going to sway you from God, so they can easily sway you from following your leader's commands, and you turn out to be a traitor. So good point, Gary.
Well, that makes sense, but
40 years, 400 years. Sometimes 40.
Yeah.
Good record keeping.
That's a long way. And we know they like their genealogies.
Just mention it, but a good source says Deuteronomy, written in about 1400 BC, that the price for unskilled labor was 7 to 10 shekels per month. Would be one way of assessing.
So 7 to 10 shekels for a month,
At that point in time, supposedly.
Use-
and we're talking about 50 shekels. So that's, so
Yeah.
50 shekels, that's a lot
That'd
of
be-
cash.
Yeah.
That's a lot of money
Back then.
back then. Verse 3, no Ammonite or Moabite or any of their descendants may enter the assembly of the Lord. So once again, why no Ammonites or Moabites?
Different faith. Didn't they kill people?
They were pagans.
Right, they killed their children.
They did, they were pagans.
Sacrificed.
Yep, so we can't have any of those guys in our military because we couldn't trust them.
Even in the 10th generation.
Yep, so like Gary said, if a generation is 40 years, talking about 400 years, it doesn't wear off. Verse 7, do not despise an Edomite, for the Edomites are related to you. Who are the Edomites?
Oh my goodness.
Esau's descendant.
I saw.
Esau's descendants, yeah. Because remember, Edom means red. And Esau was that hairy red little baby, right? That's what the Bible said. A hairy red baby.
It's a little ugly guy.
Yeah.
And Jacob was the pretty boy.
Don't say that in the presence of redheads.
I'm not saying.
Yeah.
She wasn't there.
Yep.
Oh.
They wouldn't let the Jews pass through, but they're still relatives, so they're not to be
I
excluded.
guess I wouldn't be offended by that, would I? No.
So it's,
Interesting in verse 4 that Balaam appears again.
yep,
The old swindler.
yeah, Balaam, he was a very popular guy back then. Very popular.
But is it possible to turn them up just a little bit?
Oh, sure. There we go.
Thank you.
Gary, could one of you guys say something?
Hello,
It's a little better.
hello.
Okay, a little bit better. All right, good. Okay. Oh yeah, so the Edomites, they're only excluded to the 3rd generation. And as Gary said, even though they're relatives, they still have an exclusion because they wouldn't let the Hebrews pass through their country when they were leaving Egypt. They made them go around. So God's saying, you got to pay a little bit of a penalty for that,
Yeah.
even though you're related. Uncleanliness in the camp.
Oh, okay. I was listening to this in the car on the way home from work today, and I was just going, oh boy, this was interesting.
Well, you know, some of it makes sense, some of it doesn't.
And they use it today when you're camping out in the wilderness.
Yeah.
Right, yeah, you don't want to go in your tent, for goodness sake.
No.
Um,
But I like the nocturnal emission. I was laughing so hard. Sorry.
It would be so embarrassing to have to tell the whole camp this happened, so I have to go over there now.
Till sunset the next day.
Yeah.
yeah, so, you know, so poor Saul is walking around, he's walking out of camp like this. His head is down, and someone says, what happened?
I had a wet dream.
But, okay, so, to us this is funny, but why is it even in Deuteronomy?
I can't imagine.
Because,
Disease.
Could be disease.
no, the importance of having children, a man and a woman should always be together, should not be a separate act
Right.
of all.
Right.
It's a love thing together.
Once again, it's the life issue.
Right.
You know, semen gives life when it joins with the egg of the woman. And think of, whose son was it? The one, I can't remember. Remember, he had a responsibility to his brother's wife. His brother died,
Oh, yeah.
and he had to sire a son by her, but he wouldn't. He just, spilt it on the ground, and God says, you're wrong, I'm killing you. That was in probably Genesis. The names are escaping me. But that's how much God values life. That if you have this nocturnal emission, it's not your fault, you didn't do anything, but you have to leave the camp for a day, so you can come back and get purified. So, yep, it's a big deal. What?
Since we've had yada yada talked about.
Right.
What'd he say?
Yada yada.
Oh yeah, yada yada, remember?
Sorry.
No, that's okay. So, back when we were reading Genesis, there's a term yada yada, and that means sex. So when you think of Seinfeld,
Yeah.
you know, what was her name?
Oh,
Elaine?
Elaine.
yeah.
She's saying, we went out, you know, yada yada.
Yeah.
It's like, now you know what she's talking about. Anyway, okay. Oh, and then it gets to, you have to relieve yourself, make sure you got a shovel, because you got to bury it. Just makes sense.
Why didn't they set up outhouses? Sorry.
I don't know,
Okay.
because everybody had a shovel.
That was pretty good sanitation for back then, because they didn't have respect, and they had big epidemics that would break out in
Sure.
armies and stuff for
That's true.
doing things the wrong way.
Yeah.
Along those lines.
Until God comes around and says, I've got a way around this. This is how you're going to take care of things.
Well,
Another bizarre thought, when we were young, we shoveled snow to make money. These little Israelites could have made money shoveling.
That's for sure.
Oh, I'm not gonna go there.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll move on.
Yeah, I'm not going there.
Yep, no, don't touch it.
My Uncle Joe once said, be proud of everything you do, even if you have to shovel.
oh, yeah.
You shovel
Yeah.
do it well.
You know that four-letter word.
Right. Uncle Joe didn't mince words.
He actually said the word then, right? Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yes, he did.
My audio off.
Okay, and then we have some miscellaneous laws. If a slave has taken refuge with you, do not hand them over to their master. Let them live among you wherever they like, in whatever town they choose. Do not oppress them. This was totally opposite among everybody who lived around the Israelites. Every other nation, if a slave ran away, they would turn him back to the owner. Okay. God's saying no. If somebody ran away, you let them be free. So this was totally different than everybody else. The thing that, when I read these two verses, I was thinking, how in the pre-Civil War South could people actually be Christians and not follow these verses? Because in the South, a slave ran away, they would always turn him back.
Yeah.
So it doesn't make sense to me.
And then the hunters that would track them down and...
Right, they
Yeah.
had, exactly, the hunters and bounties on slaves. So how could you be a Christian and get around these verses? I don't get it.
And all through the nation for a period of time, you were required to let these bounty hunters into your house to search, even in the north and all the states.
Yeah, doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense. Okay, no, verse 17 in chapter 23. No Israelite man or woman is to become a shrine prostitute. This is something that the pagan religions had around, because part of their religious celebration was sex. So you were able to hire these prostitutes and have sex for fertility rites. God says, not in my temple. So you couldn't be a shrine prostitute. And verse 18, to show you how God views homosexuality, he says, you must not bring the earnings of a male prostitute or a female prostitute or a male prostitute in the house of the Lord. Male prostitutes were called dogs back in the day. So it just reinforces how dislikable this was to God.
That still went on in Paul's time in Corinth, didn't it?
Exactly, exactly. So,
Things we shouldn't.
yep, it's still continued. Okay. Oh, do not charge a fellow Israelite interest. And we got that supplemental document, Loans and Interest in Judaism. So it gives out all the different regulations for charging interest, and never to a fellow Jew. If you make a vow to the Lord your God, don't be slow to pay it back. Yeah, if
When
you...
they were bankers and money lenders in the Middle Ages to Christians and stuff who couldn't be because of the Bible, just out of curiosity, within Judaism, they couldn't charge interest, right?
Right, but they could charge
But they
interest
could, okay.
to everybody else. Yep.
Oh,
In my footnote, though,
Seems like the Jews have had a good reputation of great money managers.
Yep. What, hon?
in your footnotes, it says, God never expects us to pay him back for his grace, which is free, so we should never make vows.
Yeah, yeah. Because elsewhere in the Old Testament, we see we shouldn't make vows. We shouldn't make promises to God saying, Lord, if you do this for me, I'll do that. That's not the way it works.
Right.
Not the way it works.
He doesn't make deals.
God doesn't make deals.
Right.
No. And you never want to lie to God either.
No.
So, that's why if you're going to make a vow to God, you better be prompt in your payments. Verses 24 and 25 are pretty interesting. If you enter your neighbor's vineyard, you may eat all the grapes you want, but do not put any in your basket. Why was that? Why did God make that law?
Stealing,
Right.
this is just plain eating.
Right, in the first part of that verse, if you enter your neighbor's vineyard, you may eat all the grapes you want. Because God wants us to take care of the poor. So here, you've got somebody wandering around who's starving. God says, feed them. You have to feed them. On the flip side, this person who's hungry, they shouldn't steal the crops. You don't want somebody filling up baskets full. Because they're not eating it at that moment. They're taking it out. Same thing with the grain field. Pick the kernels with your hand, but don't put a sickle to the standing grain because you're stealing. So,
They allow Ruth to do that, to harvest grain.
Right.
yeah, remember in the story of Ruth, like Gary said, God says you're not supposed to clean out your field. So what they would do back then is they would let the poor people come through after the end and take care of whatever was left.
gleaning.
Gleaning.
That was good.
Pardon?
They got her a good husband.
Yeah. Yep. When we get to that story, I'll tell you how the people at Garrett University interpret that story. Very interesting. Or I should say misinterpret that story. Deuteronomy chapter 24. If a man, Natalie, where are you when we need you? If a man marries a woman who
Get her on the
becomes
phone.
displeasing to him because he finds something indecent about her and he writes her a certificate of divorce. Okay, first of all, if the guy finds something indecent about her, that would kind of be a reason for divorce, right? Assuming he didn't make it up. But if it were true, then it would be valid. Anyway, writes her a certificate of divorce. He gives it to her and sends her from his house.